What's up guys, this is Jay from Encounter Wargaming, and today I'm going to be showing you how to make some cool little rocky terrain pieces out of this piece of trash. Other than that piece of trash, as I called it, that I showed you in the intro there, which is basically just your normal white expanded polystyrene that you get in pretty much every electrical appliance you buy. Now, pretty much everybody has access to that material. I mean, it's in everything you buy, like I say, and people always end up throwing it out. So don't hoard so much of it that you're going to piss off, you know, the people that you live with, but keep these things because they can come in handy later. Anyway, these are the other things we're going to need. As the bases of the terrain, I'm going to be using this 5mm foam core. These are just scraps left over from past terrain projects, so this is going to be the perfect use of things I just have lying around anyway. Normal skill knife, PVA glue, and we're going to be using some polyfilla on this job, just to make them look not like expanded polystyrene. And then of course we're going to need paints and all that kind of stuff, static grass, sand, but if you're a gamer then you already have that in your collection and you're good to go, so let's start building. So the first thing we're going to start with is the bases of the terrain pieces. So like I said, I've just got some scraps left over from past terrain pieces that I've made of this foam core. Standard 5mm, you know, the standard thickness you get at a lot of places. The most common thickness, I should say. Yeah, which is great for terrain bases. Yes, these are a little creased or, you know, broken or whatever, so they're not really good for anything nice, any nice terrain pieces where I need like a flat wall. So I'm going to be covering these in sand and glue and paint and all kinds of stuff, so it doesn't matter what the hell they look like. So I guess the first thing we need to do then is just separate these into bases for our terrain pieces. Now this one I've decided I'm actually going to make two small ones, so I'll just arbitrarily cut that in half, and then more or less I'm just, this obviously looks manufactured. You don't want a square base on your terrain pieces ever. You want them to look natural, to flow into other terrain pieces, flow into the table, etc. So I'm just going to take my knife and round off the corners, more or less. Now, you'll find as you're digging into this, as you do circular motions, see if I can get a better angle for the camera there, as you do circular motions your knife will start to go on a natural angle. That's okay, because we want to create sort of a beveled edge on this guy eventually anyway, so if I do that, you know, let me just cut through that last layer of Bristol there. It created sort of, let's see if I can really hold it up for you guys, it created a bevel already. There it is. So, I'm just going to go around and looking at the bottom edge of it, you know what I mean? Go around and just round the corners like this. Maybe do a little twist and a turn just to make it a little more natural. And there it is. And then I'm just going to take my knife, don't have it as far out as that, but just far enough that it would get to the other side of the foam core. And just start cutting on sort of a 45-degree angle, and we just want to bevel off all the edges of this guy. And again, it doesn't have to be pretty, it doesn't have to be nice. Start hacking at it. Make it look crazy. And then if you get stuff like this where it's got sharp edges, just go at it and take off the sharp edge again. It's just that easy. And we're just gonna, you know, we're getting rough with this. Get crazy. You don't have to be so precision with all your terrain pieces all the time, especially when dealing with nature. Nature is random. Nature is not manufactured. You don't want your terrain pieces to look manufactured. So in this case, I'm just going crazy because this is going to be the ground, right? And there it is. That's our first base. So I'm going to go and do all the scraps I have with that, just like that I should say, and we'll get right back to you. There they are, all my bases are cut and beveled. So now I'm just going to take a little bit of sandpaper. You can pretty much use any grit for this. I think this is a 150 grit. And I'm just going to go around the edges and just sand them a little bit. There are frays from the paper. Maybe you can see clearer on this guy. There's all these little like hair thingies that come off from cutting the foam that's inside the foam core. So by just running a little bit of sandpaper, I across the paper part of it and the foam part of it. It just takes all that off, cleans it up nice. Make sure that no paper is just like frayed out, because you're going to find later that if you have any pieces of the paper part of it, the Bristol board part of it, out, they're going to cause problems when gluing and painting and all that kind of stuff. So it would help to even just go around the edge like this, like on the very point of the edge, just around it a little bit. In cabinet making, we call that breaking the edge. And then on the actual foam itself, sand a bit. And then see, some of the paper is tearing up. That's good actually, because those are the parts that are loose that I want to get rid of. And again, you don't have to be too perfectionist about it. I'm even going to rip this little bit of paper off here. There we go. Make my life a little bit easier. Next, one thing I will point out about the sanding the paper on the back side of it, on the bottom side of it, is that you'll get this kind of curl over. What you can do there is just take your sandpaper and hold it flat to the bottom and just sand that right off. So there you go, that's all it is. Alright, so now that our bases are all cut, beveled, and sanded, we're gonna have some fun. So let's pull out that piece of trash I was talking about. Like I said, this is just a normal white expanded polystyrene, and the great thing about this stuff is it just pulls apart. Now, this makes it really easy to shape, but it makes it really fragile for use in game. So I'm going to show you how to protect this after. But right now, all we're going to do is just rip a bunch of chunks off this and go absolutely crazy. How's that look? Basically, I just ripped the crap out of that. Now, I ripped them into what I thought were round type pieces. Anywhere you get like a corner like that, all you have to do is just start ripping it apart. It's really that simple. Now, this stuff makes a gigantic mess, so don't, like I've said in past videos, don't do this on your mother's kitchen table. Do it somewhere where there's a vacuum or a broom nearby. In fact, vacuum is the best, because a broom is actually a pain in the butt. You'll still get these little white balls all over the place. As you can see, they just fall out, right? They're all over the friggin' place. So, next part is also incredibly simple, so let's get into it. Now, I'm just going to take my bases, and I'm going to take some white glue, and I'm just going to go like that, blam, and start grabbing pieces and throw them on. Now, where you get squeeze out from the rock pieces, that's where you start putting your smaller ones. And even though some of the sides are still flat, those are the sides you're going to put down. It actually makes it very easy. As you can see here, I've got a flat side exposed, but I've also got a flat side on this right here. So I'm just going to take a little bit of white glue, same thing, dab it right there, and line it up with that flat side. So now there is no longer a flat side. Now, don't use hot glue with this stuff. It will burn up very quickly, and you can't spray paint it either. So be careful with that. Well, you could spray paint it, but it just dissolves. It turns to crap. It turns to mush. You can't even really paint it after that. I mean, you can, but you'll find that you'll never get a good coat of paint if you try to spray paint this stuff, because as it melts, it exposes more of the white, and then you spray more paint on it to try and cover that, and it just melts it more in those right recesses, and you get the idea. So there you go. I've just done a little bit there. What I'm actually going to do is just keep piling white glue on top and try and get this thing to look like a rather large rock formation rather than being flat and static. I wanted to kind of like build it up into this like crazy thing. I've got a lot of this expanded polystyrene, the white foam, I suppose I could start calling it. It's a little easier to say. So all the pieces you saw here were just not even a quarter of that large piece that I had there. Now, the good thing and the bad thing about white glue is it takes a long time to dry. So that does give me time to sort of move things around. But as I'm stacking things on top, as I'm stacking pieces on top of other pieces, it actually makes it very hard for them to hold them up because they start sliding around and what have you. So I think that's good enough for this guy. On to the next one. Now, this piece I left large, and yes, it's still got a flat area there, but as I ripped it, I looked at it and I went, that's actually a really cool rock formation right there. In fact, I don't really like this ridge that much. I'm just gonna rip a few pieces out of it, just so it doesn't look so manufactured. In fact, on the other side, which is pretty cool, I could have this as like some kind of weird little cave thing or something. So I'm gonna take my biggest template, and that's gonna be that guy. Now, try and make it so the template kind of works for the rock, rather than it just being arbitrarily thrown on. Yeah, I think that works best. And then the standing area. Good news about the flat area in this case is then I'll be able to put models on it. That's a good vantage point. And you can even, like, once you put it down on the glue, just kind of move it around a bit. You'll find it'll actually start to like suck in and like start to find a spot where it's going to be more adhered, I guess is the right way to say that. Now, like I've said a million times already in this very short tutorial, you don't have to be a perfectionist. Just go crazy with it. Start throwing stuff everywhere. I mean, whatever, right? I said, nature is not manufactured. So you try to make it look sort of as random as possible. I kind of like that little crevasse there. That's cool. Okay, now I do have a flat side exposed on the side here. That looks kind of weird. So I'm just going to throw down a bunch of glue and start dabbing in some pieces. Now you can even push them together, and that'll cause the glue to sort of squeeze between them, which is great, because that means, like as you've seen, I've basically just been putting glue on the base. I haven't really been putting glue in between them. But then on this piece I've just been building here, I've got this little like crevice here. What I can actually do is dump white glue all around it. Don't dump it in it, because it'll just go right down to the base, but all around it, and all the pieces that are connected to it, it's just going to pour in between them and make it not so weak, because with a hole there, that part of the train piece is going to be weak unless I glue it all the way around the hole. Does that make sense? I'm sure it does. So I'm going to keep going on this, and I'll show you guys them once the white glue is dry. Cut back in for a sec. I just noticed something, a little tip I could give you guys here. So here on this terrain piece, because I've got so many pieces all clumped together, the glue is basically just running down between them and pouring out across the base of it. So I'll get this little like puddle shooting out. Now what I could do is put little tiny pieces of it in there, which is actually a good idea, but also there's still like a little glob there. So you can actually take all these little white pieces that are just kind of like randomly all over whatever table I'm sure you're doing this at, and just sprinkle them on as if they were like flock or sand or grass or whatever. And they will adhere to the white glue, or the white glue will hold them in. And you can do the same thing in areas like on the top here. I'm not sure if you guys can really see, but this piece right in here has sort of a rounded top on it. I was being kind of haphazard and didn't really think about which direction to put the piece, so I can do the same thing there. Just pour a little white glue on the smooth area, because I don't want any smooth areas here. Not that there will be once we sand it and everything, but this just adds more lumpiness to it. And I can just kind of throw that in. Sorry, I got a hair on there. Bam, just like that. And it actually gives a use to all these random little white pieces that are kicking around. So, there you go. Sweet, so now that our white glue's dry, I'm going to show you guys just on the larger piece that I'm doing here. I think I'll show you this one for the rest of the tutorial, and I'll just do the other ones off camera, but you'll see them all when they're complete. So, now that we've glued on our just random chunks of foam, we're gonna have to harden these up, because as you can see they're very squishy. The little balls still flake off all over the place. There they are. I've made a gigantic mess of this room, by the way. Anyway, now we're gonna make an even bigger mess. So, I've got here my polyfiller. You can get this at any hardware store. It's very easy to find. Or any kind of, spackling will work. I'm falling in love with this stuff right now for terrain making, so I'm trying to use it in pretty much every project I'm doing. So that's kind of why it got included in here. But it works to fill cracks and things. It works great for hardening surfaces like this. So we're going to mix in a just random plastic cup I have here. We're going to mix, I'd say 50% polyfilla, 25% water, and 25% white glue, and just stir it up rigorously. If you find that you've added too much water, you can always add more polyfilla or more white glue. I would say you want this mostly to be polyfilla, and then you're just going to stir it up. I'm stirring it up with a crappy dollar store brush that I have here, until you get sort of that consistency, if you can see, sort of the consistency of yogurt or melted ice cream or whatever. Okay, and then all we're going to do is start painting this. Now, this is going to get real messy, so I'm going to actually pull this a little closer for you guys. This is how I control some of the mess. This is really runny, as you see, and it's going to run off the model quite a bit, or off the base of our piece quite a bit. I'm going to zoom out a bit there so I can get more of this in the shot. So, I like to start by angling it like this over the cup. And in fact, this one's good because it's skinny, because it will run off like crazy. And rather than it run off all over your workbench, it's great that it runs off back into the cup, because then I can still use that. I'm not wasting it, and it's not making a gigantic mess. So, sort of starting at the top side here, I'm going to basically paint it on, as if you would paint. Now you want to just kind of stab the foam. Don't brush across it, because like I say, those little white balls will start to come off. So you want to kind of stab it and put it on what right now is the top anyway. And as you can see, it's already starting to drip down the piece quite a bit, and it's getting all over my cutting mat, but that's fine. We want to make sure that we get lots of it in any spaces between the foam, as well as all over the surface of it, because this foam will soak it up real good. And that way it just sort of holds all those little styrofoam balls that it's composed of together. You're basically adding not only a layer of white glue, but also a layer of spackling, the same spackling you would use to fill a crack in your walls. So it's going to be pretty strong. I mean, if somebody steps on it or leans their whole weight on it, of course it's going to be broken, so will any model or terrain piece. So anyway, as you can see, I am also painting the foam core, making sure to get lots of it in the edges, the exposed foam. I want it to soak in there, because I don't want exposed foam showing through anywhere. Plus it's weak, so the whole point of this is to sort of strengthen it up. Make sure you get it all in there. Now, also, I will comment that I'm not only going to paint the top of this as well as all the foam, but you also want to paint the bottom. And I'm going to tell you one reason for that. If you only paint the top of this, especially because we're using foam core, you'll find all the edges will peel up, and you'll be left with this mound underneath in the center of the piece, and it'll just wobble all over the place, models will fall over. So if you paint the bottom at the same time, then everything shrinks together and when it dries, and that way you don't get one side shrinking and the other side, you know, still expanded. That's why it curls in like that, because the top shrinks. So we don't want that. So we're just going to paint the entire bottom with this crazy concoction too. Because don't worry guys, we will be painting on top of this. So you will find that this will be really flaky once it's dry, really sandy, but that's good. So that's kind of what we want. We're going for rock formations here, right? And the good news is, a lot of people use polyfill on their styrofoam terrain. The good news with this mixture of mostly water as well as the PVA glue to hold to sort of create like a plasticky type consistency to it once it's dry, you don't have to sand it afterwards. Like if I had covered these in polyfill, just lathered it on, I would have to sand everything later. This way, everything just kind of flows into the crevices. It covers all the weird little balls. Here now it's starting to drip off the edge, so I'm going to start holding it over my cup. it holds in all these weird little balls, because this styrofoam actually is not great for terrain making. I'm trying to show you guys an easy solution to a otherwise useless material. And the truth is, we just usually throw this stuff out. I mean, it's garbage, right? It's trash. But so there you have it, completely painted with our polyfiller mixture, and we're gonna let this dry overnight and see how it looks tomorrow. Alright, so there's our terrain piece after 24 hours of drying. As you can see, it's not 100% dry yet, especially all the pooling down here along the bottom. I don't know if you can see the shininess in that little like cave thing there. But it's not 100% dry yet, but that's okay, because the next step, I'm gonna have to wait for drying time again, and I'm not waiting a whole another day and then putting on the sand and waiting a whole another day. So long story short, the next step, we're putting on sand. Now, first of all, you'll notice that where it dripped off the piece, all this, you know, liquid concoction that we made in the last clip, you'll get these globs on the edges, and those will actually break off very easily. So you don't want to leave them on at this stage, because you'll put sand on top, you put paint on top, and then they're just going to chip off afterwards and make some really ugly, just ruin your paint job. So we're going to go around the edge of it right now, and I'm just going to go with my fingers and pick off any of the little globs. This one's actually not too bad. A couple of my other ones were really bad where it ran off, because a couple of them I had to mix it a couple times, so I added more water or less water. This was one of the ones that had less water in it, so use lots of the crack filler, guys. Just use a little bit of water and glue. I gave you the suggestion of like a 50 to 25-25, so 50% crack filler, 25 of each of the other ingredients. I would actually say maybe even more than that, maybe even 60% crack filler, 30% white glue, and then just a little bit of water just to mix everything together and get it to spread around the foam. As you can see, because this was one of the thicker ones, especially where there are flat areas, it's sort of pooled in the corners, and that's good because that will create nice transitions between all the levels. So our next step is pretty simple. It's just like you would do on a base or any other terrain piece. This is like the basics of terrain right here, is just taking some white glue, got my palette there, normal white PVA glue, and I'm going to take my sand, got a nice big fat brush, where my brush is at, crappy dollar store brush that I don't care about, and just take some PVA glue. Now, I'm not only going to paint the entire base here with the PVA all the way down to the edge, but also on top of the rocks. Anywhere I see where it looks still too much like foam, or I've got a massive gap like in there, I'm going to want to put a crap load of glue and try and get some sand to sort of fill those gaps, cover the areas I don't think look like rock, that still kind of look like styrofoam, because even after they're painted, I don't want these to just look like styrofoam on the table. I want them to look like rock formations, right? So, especially on like the side of this sort of pillar one there, it still looks a little too much like a bunch of little styrofoam balls. So I'm just going to take a little bit of this white glue and just hit it here, hit it there, just to break up the pattern of the little styrofoam balls. And just go crazy with it, guys. Get messy. Go nuts. Put it everywhere. Sorry, I'm a little off camera there. There you go. Put it everywhere. Just get all over that thing. And then the next step, I'll just show you on the corner of this piece, and then I'll do the rest of it off camera. But the next step, after hitting this whole area with glue, pretty simple. Again, most of you wargamers and terrain makers should already know what the hell this is. This is the basics of basics, but for those of you who are watching this kind of stuff for the first time, this is all it is. I've got my modeling sand, a mixture of different grits, and I'm just going to pour it on top. And up on my little like pillar piece there that I added the glue to. And as you saw, I put down a piece of printer paper. Now the reason I do this is because this is going to make a gigantic mess, and I would rather catch it all not only not to waste the sand, but also not to make a mess of the entire room. And as you can see, I actually folded the paper in half before I started, so now I can just pick it up, even in one hand, and do that, and just pour it right back in. Bam. None wasted, and I can go right back at it. And that's more or less all it is, guys. So I'm just going to go around the entire terrain piece, get glue anywhere I really feel it needs to be, and then just throw sand on top. I'm going to do it on all the other terrain pieces, and then we'll be right back at you after all that's dry. Sweet, so it's been another 24 hours and our white glue is pretty much dry. I mean, there's still a couple of wet spots here and there, especially because the spackle water glue mixture that I originally used was still a little wet when I applied the sand. And the next layer of PVA glue to hold the sand down. So I've got here this gigantic bottle of just water-based bird number. I picked this up at the art store. It was super cheap. You guys have seen this bottle before, actually, in our very first terrain series we did on this channel, the Malifaux terrain. This painted the entire Malifaux table, and I've still got, I'll show you guys, a crap load left. So we're going to be using it on this stuff too. It's a good base for pretty much all terrain. So, I'm just going to take a little bit out of my palette, and my big fat brush, and we're just going to start painting. So, the key with the sand, actually, is not, I've mentioned this before, but it's good not to do strokes against the sand. You'll end up ripping a lot of your sand off, especially because we didn't put a watered down PVA mixture on top of the sand, which is a good idea, I suggest it, but it's not always necessary. This paint, even though it is acrylic, is actually pretty thick. So without watering it down, I'm just gonna glob it on there, get a whole bunch in the brush. This isn't like miniatures, you can be messy with terrain. So I'm just gonna start stabbing it. And the reason stabbing is better than like brushing is because A, you're not gonna tear your sand off. It will come off into your brush, but not as much. But also because of the styrofoam, you need to get in between all those little balls, for lack of a better word. Now, you see there? It's actually covered pretty good. If I hadn't have put on that spackle and white glue mixture before I started painting it, it would take me forever. I would have to put layers upon layers of this brown paint on top, because it would not only soak into the styrofoam, but you start to see I guess the spaces between the little foam balls. So it'd just be like all these white marks everywhere. But as you can see, right here was all exposed foam, well, exposed white through the sand. Now it's perfectly brown, and you can't see any white seams, no problem. And also, you'll find, especially working with this material, that there are still areas that still look like little styrofoam balls. So actually, this is the stage where it's a good idea to glob it on, because you will actually fill the seams between those little styrofoam balls, and they won't look so much like a bunch of little styrofoam balls. So I'm just going to keep going around, stabbing the sand, stabbing my crazy rock pieces here. Now, as you can see from the edge of the terrain base here, because we painted the bottom of it with that spackle and white glue mixture as well as the top, the successive layers I've put on now of PVA glue and now brown paint won't be curling the edges. As you can see, if I can hold that straight for you guys, we've got absolutely no curling at this point. And hopefully with that, like I say, that crazy mixture layer, I've created a good enough protection that no matter how many layers of whatever the hell else I want to put on top of this, I won't be curling the edges of my foam core. And that's key to making these terrain pieces look proper. Also making them more durable, too. So I'm just going to keep going at this, and I'm going to do all the other ones, and we'll come back to you when they're fully brown. Alright, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. Join us again next week, where we're going to take our rocky terrain pieces that we've already built and paint them up and make them look good. I'll show you guys how I'm going to turn them into some nice terrain for our Malifaux table. So if you like our terrain tutorials, please hit subscribe below. Also, check out the link below to our Patreon account. It's what keeps us going. We don't do this to make money, but it costs money to do this. So if you want to keep seeing cool terrain, you want me to keep building cool terrain pieces for you, then check out that link. For only $1 a video, it goes a huge way for us. So thanks for watching, guys, and until our next encounter.
Like a monkey in a rocket on its way back home. Okay.